So you just got your brand new fish tank, it's your first fish tank, and you want to set it up and enjoy fish right away, but all the research that you've done has told you that you cannot add fish until it's gone through what's called the nitrogen cycle. Well, today I'm going to share with you how you can start enjoying your fish right away, and also give you some tips on how to quarantine your fish. Hey fish friends, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Zenzo from Tazawa Tanks. Now in this video, as I shared, I'm going to tell you how you can start enjoying your fish right away. You just bought your new tank, you've set it up, and you want to go to the store and buy some fish. So usually what will happen is if you do some research, you will learn that you need to let your tank go through what is called the nitrogen cycle, which is basically setting up your aquarium, letting it sit for a number of weeks until the beneficial bacteria in the filter and in the tank have had a chance to establish themselves, and that you don't have anything harmful in there like ammonia or nitrite. Now this can usually take about 3 to 6 weeks depending on kind of your starting point, but basically it's about a month or so for a brand new tank that's never been utilized before. It doesn't have any like cycled media. If you set it up and if you don't have like live plants or anything in there, it can take a long time. And if you're getting your first tank, you might want to enjoy your fish right away. Well, today we'll talk a little bit about how you can do that. Now, one thing that some stores might tell you, and it's usually like the big box stores where they have someone that's, you know, not a fish expert and doesn't know a whole lot about aquatics, and they'll say, yeah, just, you know, set up your tank, come back tomorrow, put some dechlorinator in there, and we can sell you some fish. That's actually very poor advice, and usually what happens when people follow those steps is the fish do not make it, and they usually will pass due to succumbing to ammonia burns or, you know, nitrite poisonings. So I would recommend to ignore that advice, but do pay attention to the nitrogen cycle. It is important. Now, I'm not going to get into the details on what the nitrogen cycle is. What I'll do is I'll put a link down below to a video that one of my colleagues made, and it's very detailed and explanatory in a basic way to help you understand what the nitrogen cycle is. So let's say that you just got your new tank, and I've got an empty tank here as an example, and filter. I don't have a heater in here or anything, but you've got all the equipment and you want to go home and set it up and, you know, put fish in there. Well, what will happen is if you don't have any beneficial bacteria to start, that's when you're going to have problems with as soon as something goes in the aquarium, you put a fish in there, and that fish, you know, eats food and passes the waste. That waste will turn into ammonia. Ammonia is very toxic to fish. And then after a period of time, that ammonia will also convert into nitrite, which is also extremely toxic to fish, and your fish will usually die if there's even a small amount of nitrite or ammonia in the aquarium. So that's why people go through the nitrogen cycle, which basically allows time for the ammonia to be converted to nitrite and for the nitrite to be converted to nitrate, which then in turn is easier to manage and less toxic to your fish. But that does take time, and we don't always want to wait 4, 5, 6 weeks to put fish in our brand new fish tank. So one thing that you can do is when you go to the store, go to a local fish store, you know, a mom and pop store where they have, you know, a good selection of fish, and ask them if they can give you any cycled media. Now, cycled media, what that is they're basically giving you something out of an aquarium filter that has been established, that has a lot of gunk in it. That gunk is actually good. That beneficial bacteria is in that filter media, and that bacteria will actually break down the ammonia and the nitrite, and that's what you want. So some fish stores, you know, they'll give you they'll pull out like their filter floss, or they might have like old sponges or something in their filters, and what they'll do is they can put that like in a little jar or a, you know, plastic bag with water in it, and you can take that and put it right into your aquarium, and basically that's giving you a jump start, and you now have beneficial bacteria in your aquarium. Another thing that you can do if they're not able to give you filter media, maybe ask a friend. Maybe there's people in your local area that have fish tanks, and you can ask them, hey, can you give me something out of your filter so that I can get this tank started? You can also ask them to squeeze out their stuff. So let's say that they have like a bunch of, you know, sponge filters or sponge material in their filter. They can actually just take that filter material that's all gunky, that has like fish waste and everything on it for a period of weeks, and they can take it and squeeze all that mulm and brown icky stuff, which is, you know, it's not pleasant to look at, but you know, you want to get your tank started and enjoy it right away. So if they squeeze out all that icky stuff out of that sponge or out of that filter media and put it in a plastic bag, and now you have like this Ziploc bag with brown dirty water in it, you could actually take that brown dirty water that they just squeezed all their icky stuff into it, pour that right into your new aquarium. Obviously you want to make sure that your water is dechlorinated, because chlorine will kill beneficial bacteria, as will chloramine. So once you dechlorinate your tap water and you pour in that gunky brown water from that filter, then you're adding all that beneficial bacteria that they had in their filter into yours. And basically, again, you're giving your aquarium a jump start. Another thing that you can do is you can actually buy a filter from an aquarium store and ask them if they will exchange it for another filter that they have. So depending on the store and how they're set up, you know, you could buy a sponge filter from them. For example, this is a sponge filter and it's air driven. It's very inexpensive. This one's probably about $7 or $8 maybe. And you'll just say, hey, if I buy this brand new one, can I take the old one out of your tank and just replace it with this brand new one? And in a lot of cases, most stores will say, sure, here, I'll put the old one in a plastic bag with some water. We'll put the new one in the tank, since they already have like established bacteria in other parts of the aquarium, on the glass, on the substrate, etc. And then you take, again, that bag of water with the filter in it and just set that up in your new aquarium. And again, you can start running that right away. And you can do the same thing by asking a friend or someone, a colleague that has a fish tank, hey, can I, you know, buy a filter for you and replace it or whatever. So in a lot of cases, people are accommodating and will help you. Now, another thing that you can do, which is actually a lot easier in some cases, and that is to add live aquarium plants into your aquarium. So if you're setting up a new aquarium and you have, you know, your gravel and your filter and everything, and you just cannot find someone to give you beneficial bacteria, they don't have, you know, filters for you to exchange, and no one's, you know, willing to squeeze out their media or whatever, and you're kind of on your own, which is the case for a lot of people. If you buy live aquarium plants, a lot of times you don't have to worry about those other parts because you're still getting the benefits. Now, a couple of reasons why. One, plants consume the waste that the fish produce. So if you have live plants in the aquarium, then depending on how many fish you have, so let's say that you have a minimal amount of fish to begin with. Maybe you're just starting out, you have like 3 or 4 fish, and you have several plants that you purchased. When you put those plants in the aquarium, those plants will consume the waste that the fish produces. The other thing that's beneficial, when you buy the plants, a lot of times you're going to have what's called rock wool. Basically, when you get a brand new plant from a fish store or online or wherever it may be, it'll come like in a little plastic basket, and in that basket there's like a wool material, and it's just soaked with water, obviously, and the plant is growing out of that wool material. You can actually take that entire pot, that plastic container with the rock wool and the plant, and put that directly into your aquarium, and there is possibly or most likely beneficial bacteria in that rock wool as well. So if that aquatic plant was in, you know, holding tank or you know, some kind of plant system, then there's going to be beneficial bacteria in there. So you are automatically adding some bacteria into your aquarium because it's in that rock wool. So it could also be on the surfaces of the plant if it's kept damp, but it will be in that rock wool. So it shouldn't be too daunting or scary to set up your first fish tank. If you are doing your research, which you're doing now by watching videos on YouTube, then it should be relatively easy. Just do your research, you know, look at some articles, read some blog articles. I'll put some links down below for some good blog articles as well. And then take those steps that I just shared with you, and then you should be fine being able to add fish right away. So in my situation, let's say that I were setting up a quarantine tank, and let's talk a little bit about quarantining. So if you do get new fish, then you don't have other fish, it's your first tank, so you really don't need to worry about quarantining per se, because everything in your system is going to be quarantined, because there's nothing that's in there already that could be harmed by infections or parasites or whatever coming in, diseases coming into your established tank. But let's say, 3 months down the road, you have your tank all set up and it's cycled and you're happy and you took those steps earlier. And then maybe you want to buy a few more fish to add to your aquarium. But now, if you take those fish that, were already established in your aquarium, and then you take new fish and you put them in there, the new fish that you're bringing in could have parasites and other diseases that could harm your fish that are already in there. So that's where you're going to want to have a quarantine tank. Now, the quarantine system is the exact same thing as having a brand new aquarium. There is no difference as far as setup. What I like to recommend people do is to always have some kind of cycled media available, and just have a spare 10-gallon tank or a plastic like Rubbermaid tote that you can buy at Target or Walmart, and just have that in a closet somewhere. So as an example, this is a 10-gallon tank. It's really, it's relatively small, doesn't take up a lot of space. Obviously it's a tank, so I can put stuff in it if I need to store things in there. And this could easily fit in the bottom of a closet or somewhere in the garage. I would just say don't keep it anywhere where you have huge temperature fluctuations. So if you live in a very cold climate, maybe the garage is not a good idea, because in the wintertime you'll have issues with the silicone and stuff like that. But if you're in a moderately temperate climate, or just keep it indoors, just keep it in a closet somewhere, in a pantry somewhere, just keep it clean. Put it in a plastic bag, whatever you want to do, stick it away. And if you ever do have a situation where you need to quarantine fish for a medication, or if you need to quarantine fish that you just bought new from the store, then you have something set up. So then all you need to do, go into your closet, pull out this very light 10-gallon tank, or again, a plastic Rubbermaid tote, which I've done before, kind of like those storage bins. I've done that before. My colleagues do that still. And it's the same thing. You just have a relatively medium-sized vessel that can hold water, and you can then put your filter in there. So having established filter media is important. So I always like to have a spare sponge filter. I always keep extra sponge filters running in some of my tanks, but obviously I have a lot of aquariums, so that's pretty easy for me. But I can also take it apart, and just take this little sponge right here. So this sponge, weighs like an ounce, and I can squeeze it so it's super small. And I can stuff this inside any other filter. So if I had, let's say, this filter running, I could take this little sponge, stick it in the filter basket, bury it in there, and just leave it in there all the time. And then when I need to set up a new tank, I just pull this out of the existing filter and put it in the new tank, set it back up, and I have a ready-to-go filter. You can also put this on like sump filters inside of a canister, or just have it set up and bubbling in your aquarium. So having an extra sponge or a sponge filter ready to go is so easy, and that way you'll have a quarantine tank whenever you need. So that's about it. If you do want to use medications when you quarantine fish, it is something that I do and something that I would recommend. So ick is something that's very common. It's a disease that has like white spots all over the body. It's a parasite, I should say. I use ICX, which is a very good product. I've tried other products. This is the one that's never failed me. You could just use regular aquarium salt. So if you live in a country or somewhere that you don't have medications available, or if you don't want to use medications for some reason, just using aquarium salt, and just make sure that you follow directions, do your research to find out how much salt to use. But aquarium salt can also really combat a lot of parasites and infections, bacterial infections and things like that. And then lastly, if you do happen to get medications, these are the meds that I use. This is Pear Cleanse, which is a medicine for like parasites and things like that. And then this is Maricin, which is an antibiotic. So oftentimes when fish are in transport or at the wholesalers or in the fish store, there's like hundreds of them in the aquarium, and they're getting bumped around, or they got bumped around in transit, or they got their fin nipped, and they might have a little bit of an infection, and using that antibiotic will help to heal them. So other than that, very basic. Having a quarantine tank is easy, and people ask me all the time, well, I only have one tank, how do I have a quarantine tank? Well, again, just have this spare little sponge tucked away somewhere. You could even take this and just stick it in your aquarium, like hide it under a rock or behind a plant or something. It's still going to have bacteria on it. And then when you need it, pop it out, put it in the little, on the stem, and put it in your new aquarium. And then again, you can use an empty 10-gallon tank. These things are really inexpensive. I don't know where you live in your country, but here in the United States, you can find these 10-gallon aquariums for like $13 to $15 usually on sale, sometimes even cheaper. Or you can, again, just go to Target or Walmart or any big box store and just buy a plastic storage bin. They're like 5 to 8 gallons, and then you'll still have your quarantine system. So hopefully this video was helpful for those of you that have set up a new tank, or if you're not quite sure how to have a quarantine tank, hopefully this helps. If you do want to learn a little bit more about quarantining, then I would say to click on this video right here, which will have some more discussion on the quarantine process. That's all I had for now. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.